The world is asking what happened to Jamaica at the 2025 World Relays in Guangzhou, China. 9 months after the land of wood and water failed to win a relay medal at the Paris Olympic Games, the nation again produced an underwhelming performance, qualifying just 2 teams for September's World Championships in Tokyo, Japan. Let's detail what happened at the weekend and the implications going forward. So Jamaica qualified automatically for just 2 of 5 relays, winning 2 medals, including silver in the mixed 4x100, which will not be contested at September's World Championships in Tokyo. The other medal came in the women's 4x100, where the team of Natasha Morrison, Shelley and Fraser Price, Tina Clayton and Shericka Jackson finished third to book their spot to Tokyo. Also booking their spot was the men's 4x400 team of Rasheen McDonald, Demar Francis, Zandrian Barnes and Therese Roden, who finished third in their heat during Sunday's second round of qualifying, having failed to make the final on day 1. The mixed 4x400 team just missed out with a 4th place finish in their heat, again during Sunday's second round of qualifying. There was misfortune for the men's 4x100 after failing to successfully effect the baton change between second leg runner Julian Fort and third leg Johan Blake on day 1. Fort suffered an injury on day 2 as the team failed to finish on both days. And the women's 4x400 team of Jodine Williams, Renisha McGregor, Kellyanne Beckford and Rhonda White finished an embarrassing last in their heat on Saturday and did not return for Sunday's second qualifying round. Now, Williams, who split a very slow 56.85 on the opening leg on Saturday, defended herself against a barrage of social media attacks. The 31-year-old confirming that she picked up an injury days ahead of the meet, which the coaches were aware of. Now, she said her warm-up went well, but she felt tightness in her hamstring, and while she considered stopping, she took the bold decision to deliver the baton. So, what does this all mean? To answer that, let's explain the qualifying system for this year's World Championships. It's the 13th to the 21st of September in Tokyo, Japan. Now, 16 teams per relay qualify for the World Championship. 14 automatically qualify from the World Relays, and 2 are chosen based on fastest times between February 25, 2024. So that's when the qualifying period started, and it will end August 25, 2025. So that is when teams have until to try and produce times fast enough to get one of the 2 remaining spots to the World Championship. So where does this put the Jamaican teams that missed out? Here we go. Let's start with the women's 4x400. The Jamaicans are currently ranked 16th in the world. That means they're in the final qualifying spot behind the Netherlands, who are 15th. The Czech Republic, Finland and Nigeria, the other teams outside of the top 16 at this stage. So if things remain like this, the women's 4x4 team will be competing at the World Championships in Tokyo. Let's have a look then at the I'm not sure we have the correct graphics here. The men's 4x100 we should be having a look at, as well as the mixed 4x400. The mixed 4x400 team, they are also in 16th position at this stage, while the men's 4x100 team, they are outside of a qualifying position, which means they have to run and produce a time at least faster than 38.20 seconds to have a shot at making it to the World Championships in Tokyo, Japan. All right, so there's a look at the mixed 4x4 again. Netherlands leading the way with that 3:07.43 they did at the Olympic Games last year. Jamaica 3:11.06, that time was also done at the Olympic Games. So those are the teams at this stage in 15th and 16th positions. Those are the final 2 qualifying positions. Nigeria, Switzerland and the Bahamas outside of qualifying places at this stage, but they have until the 25th of August, remember, to try and produce times to leapfrog Jamaica and Netherlands. I can promise you the Netherlands will not be beaten. And then there's also the men's 4x100. This is where the Jamaicans are in the biggest danger of not making it to Tokyo, because Nigeria at 38.20 and the Netherlands also 38.20. They're in 15th and 16th positions Brazil, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago outside that top 16. Those three teams will have to run and try and produce times quick enough, at least for now, faster than 38.20, because I'm sure Nigeria and the Netherlands will be looking to improve on those times. All right, so now that we have provided the context, let's get the analysis. And with that, we have Leighton Levy. Leighton, as usual, it's great to have you. Let's start the conversation by getting your general overall assessment of what happened at the weekend in China, specific to the performance of the black, green, and gold.
Poor. I mean, there's no two ways about it. The mixed relays, which probably was our best, not probably was our best performance, is not at the World Championships this year, which means that technically we've only qualified one team, which is the women's 4x1, and they were particularly impressive against the context of the fact that this is early in the year. This is still May.
Well, two teams, the women's 4x1 and the men's 4x4.
Yeah, the men's 4x4, but in terms of qualification, yes. But in terms of contending for the podium finish, I mean, we've gotten to a point in the last 2 years, Ricardo, where we are qualifying teams now in the second round of qualifiers. We are not contending for medals, which is what I think the World Relays should be about. And what is unfortunate, what it seems to have become, is a meet where people send their second and third string teams to qualify for major championships, instead of being the spectacle I think it was intended to be, where the best relay teams in the world came to showcase their best talents and set records and excite audiences. That's not what it has become. But in that context, still, Jamaica didn't do particularly well, like we've seen in the last few iterations of the meet. And of course, 2025 was no different.
Yeah, Leighton, I want to start by looking at the 4x400, because I think a lot of the issues and the embarrassment came because we did not have quality female 400-meter runners. That's how I view the situation. Now, I want to take a look at some numbers, starting with the fastest Jamaicans in 2025 in the women's 400 meters. A list led by Dejane Oakley at 50.35, who is in university. Stacey Ann Williams at 50.37. So here you have Dejane Oakley, she's in university, the fastest Jamaican this year. Stacey Ann Williams, the second fastest. She was selected, but she did not make it to China. Nikisha Price, 50.71, unavailable. Leah Anderson, haven't been able to confirm whether she was available. She was not selected. Shaquina Foote, University. Shanky Williams, University. Joanne Reed, University. Andronette Knight, she was listed on the squad, but again did not make it to China. Anika Makanov, again University. Brianna White, 52.01 in 10th place, unconfirmed. Then you look at the 2024 list of fastest Jamaican women. That 2024 list now, which is led, of course, by Nikisha Price with her national record 48.57, Stacey Ann Williams, Stephanie Ann McPherson is retired, Janelle Brumfield, well, I'm not 100% sure of her status, and Cherokee Young, I'm not 100% sure of her status. So the top Jamaican women from 2024 and 2025 so far were not in China. I want to have a quick look at the squad that was selected for China, because that tells an important story as well. Some of the names you'll see, you've already seen. Stacey Ann Williams, she didn't attend. Cheyenne Salmon was selected. Now look, Stacey Ann Williams is the second fastest Jamaican this year. She didn't attend. Cheyenne Salmon is the 11th fastest Jamaican this year. She was selected, didn't attend. Shanake Anderson is the 12th fastest Jamaican this year. She was in China, but didn't compete. Renisha McGregor is the 19th fastest Jamaican. She competed, along with Jodine Williams, the 22nd fastest Jamaican this year. Kellyanne Beckford, the 30th fastest Jamaican this year. And Rhonda White, the 61st fastest Jamaican this year. So Leighton Levy, explain to me why we would expect a team that included women ranked in Jamaica alone, we're not talking about world,
About the world.
to be going to a world relays and producing at a high level?
Well, this is kind of like sending me to fight Mike Tyson as I speak, huh? Where, there's only one likely outcome. The reality is that we picked a weak team and we got weak results. I mean, you can't, no matter how you spin it, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I think it goes even further. When you look at, for example, the mixed 4x4, when you had Nisha Berger, who's primarily a 200-meter runner as well, having her run 400-meter races, that how this team was assembled is a little bit mysterious because it makes little sense. And I think when you consider all those things, you didn't expect them to go up against stronger teams and then produce anything significant. And that's exactly what happened, Ricardo. When you look at the rankings that you just mentioned a while ago, which suggests that this is that third or fourth ranked Jamaican team in terms of quality.
It's not third or fourth, Leighton, it's sixth or seventh.
There you go. I'm being kind here because I'm trying to be civil. So the reality is that we're sending a team that, based on the performance at the World Relays, would not win a chance this past March. So what you're looking at is a team that was not ready or capable of winning anything, and barely, well, they didn't show for the final really, but so basically that speaks volumes. And of course, what angered, I think, a lot of fans was Jodine Williams' performance in the first round, where she ran almost a minute for the 400 meters.
Yeah, she ran 56.8.
Yeah, but it was almost a minute. I mean, the reality, that's what it is. Her explanation would have probably helped to appease some of the angst that was, being most, to me, people are calling me, I tell you, people are calling me from literally across the globe. What is wrong with the Jamaican team? And I said, I don't know, because I really didn't know. She literally then explained, she gave an explanation that she was not healthy, and of course the fact that she was not healthy. The reality is that the team couldn't show up for the final.
Yeah.
So that's the situation where we find ourselves.
Yeah, isn't it also unfair, though, Leighton, for individuals to, be coming down on Jodine Williams, because the situation was created because there was nobody else to run? Shouldn't Jodine Williams be hailed as almost a hero by risking her own future to attempt to compete, even just to attempt? Because otherwise, that team would not have shown up at all, although some would say maybe that was best.
Look, for you and I, that makes sense. As you know, Jamaican track and field, I use the word fines very loosely here, extremely loose. They are caught up in all of this emotionally. You've seen it from the comments on social media. They were angry at her, without an explanation. And here's the part of the thing that I want to mention, Ricardo. I think the management of the team failed her in that regard, because after what happened in the qualifying round, should have released a statement explaining what happened, so that people would be able to understand why she ran the way she ran. However, it took a comment from her after the meet was over for people to have an understanding of what may have gone on. So I think the J3 has dropped the ball in that respect, because they should have at least put out a statement explaining that she was injured and hence not able to perform up to any level of expectation whatsoever. That she finished the leg in itself, based on what you said, was a miracle.
Yeah, but Leighton, why should we be surprised? This is the same J3s that released a team and then individuals pulled out, didn't turn up in China. And to this point, the governing body has not said why the likes of Stacey and Williams and Cheyenne Salmon did not turn up to China, why Shanike Anderson, who was in China, did not compete, why Antoinette Knight, who was listed as part of the team, was not in China. Have you been able to glean what happened with these athletes? Because the major issues that we faced in Gwangju surrounded the absence of those female quarter-milers.
All right, so Antoinette, let me start with her. She said she was not on the entry list. And when I looked at the original team that was released, her name was not on it. However, it was on the entry list in in China, which then brings another issue altogether, because if she was not on the initial list that was released by the day three is when they announced the team to begin with, why then is she on the entry list in Guangzhou? And of course, we haven't heard anything from Jodine Williams. We haven't heard anything from Sharon Salmon. We cannot assume anything until we hear from them. And of course, we're not hearing from the J3s, who, by the way, at their last AGM said they were going to be more transparent than ever before. We haven't seen any indication of that yet. So we're still left in the dark, and until we start to find answers, people start to speak about why those athletes were not there, then we are left to speculate.
Yeah, and Leighton, you know, I listened to you and Ricardo, and I feel like this actually begs for a bigger discussion, you know. This begs for us to have a conversation now about the J3As and where they dropped the ball, and, you know, hold them accountable too for some of the things that happened, Leighton, that, you know, maybe should not have happened.
Yeah, look, I've always said one of the things about the J3As is that it appears to be that they think that they are a law unto themselves, and they have no responsibility to say anything to anybody, because, you know, who are we? Yeah? We are not the fans who turn out to support their meets. We are not the fans who support the athletes who represent them. And of course, they say nothing. So it's almost as if the J3s think that this is all about them. Their responsibility, their primary job, their only job is to make lives better for the athletes who represent the country and by extension represent the J3s. We haven't heard anything from them. They continue to be tight-lipped about any and everything you ask. And when you even go back to the situation with the contracts last year, the contract they re-signed with Puma, they released a statement on their AGM saying that they're going to be transparent and everything. Nothing. This is 6 months later. So what are we to expect from them? I don't think we expect anything. And I think it's honestly time that somebody has the gall to stand up and find a way to break the shackles of what the J3 has become, which is a little authoritarian institute where they believe that they are who people want to see. They are people who people pay to come to the stadium to watch. They are the people who go and run the beats in wherever the global championships are. They need to do a better job. And I think I'm already blacklisted, because they already said to me that I'm the troublemaker. I'm told by the president that I'm a troublemaker. But the reality is that they don't feel that they need to be held accountable for anything. And that's a big part of the problem, because they don't communicate with the public. They clearly have a communication problem with the athletes. And as a result, they have a situation where they are the ones. I mean, look at last year what happened with Nelka Clunis, right? All of it, it's rolling from year to year. And what we are seeing is the athletes are increasingly frustrated, which is part of the reason probably why they fail to turn up for these events, because they don't feel like they're being represented properly by the J3s. They don't feel like they're being supported by the J3s in the correct ways. And as a result, they don't feel any sense of national pride, because the organization that's supposed to represent national pride for them is letting them down. Yeah. And I don't care who is upset, because the fact is the evidence is there for all to see.
Yeah, and most importantly, they don't feel respected, because, of course, respect goes both ways. And Leighton, it's funny that you said you've been blacklisted, because, you know, while listening to you talk, I said to myself, well, maybe the onus is on us as journalists, because, you know, we always say we have the capacity to ask the questions, but then you responded in your own way by saying, you know, you would have tried in various ways, but now you're sort of ostracized in that manner.
Yeah, look, a big part of the problem, Mr. Murray, and this is a different conversation altogether, but let me just say this. One of the things that a lot of journalists fear in this country when it comes to organizations like the J3s is access. Because they think that if they say the things that they need to say and hold the J3s and other similar organizations' feet to the fire, then they won't have access to the people that they need to get access to report the way they want to. But the reality is that if they're not providing information anyway, what's the point? Somebody has to be held accountable. The rules that govern these organizations prevent governmental interference, yes, but so the onus is on the journalistic arm, the fourth estate, to hold these people's feet to the fire and hold them accountable. And something has to change, and whether or not they like it or not, they're accountable to the people of this country who they are asking to to turn up to support them and support the athletes. And if they are not able to do so, then you have the problems that you have now. So, I mean, frankly, from my perspective, I do what I can. I ask the questions that need to be asked. They are not answered, obviously. When we asked about the contract, I was asked, why everybody's so upset about the word on the Puma deal. But we saw Adidas make our offer. We haven't heard anything from the J3s about whether or not the offer was matching the Adidas deal. We are told now that it's not a matter of better than, but they are, Adidas, Puma has supported Jamaica. And nobody's saying anything that they shouldn't sign a Puma deal, but certainly give us some information. Let us have some context as to what it means, these new contracts that are being signed, and then turn around and say that you don't have money to do this when there were opportunities for you to get the kind of support that you need had you done the right thing. So, we don't know what the new Puma deal is. We will probably never know. But the reality is that, and again, we were diverging from the main point here, but it goes back to what has happened last year and the year before that, and it's happened at the Olympics. It has happened consistently, where there's no communication between the J3s and the general public. And clearly there's been issues with communication between them and the athletes as well. So who are they talking to? Themselves?
You say not lack of communication with them and the athletes as well, and I would suggest coaches as well, Leighton, because last year after the failure of the 4x400 men's team to qualify, Glenn Mills was live in the studio here on our show, and he spoke to the issue of availability of athletes who were in form, and suggested that there needs to be a sit-down between the administration and the coaches to set a plan for the World Relays as one of the main tools to qualify for the majors, i.e. the Olympics or the World Championships. So a year later, we see the exact same thing happening, and we have to ask the questions, didn't we learn anything from what happened last year?
Nothing at all. Absolutely nothing. Right? Because, and we have to make this assumption, Lance, because we don't have any communication to say otherwise. So based on what happened in China, and based on what we saw happen in Paris last year, what we saw happen in Oregon in 2022, what we've seen happen for years, nobody says anything because there's a sense that, we don't need to say anything. We don't need, why ask Garth Gale at the launch champs about doing a review of what happened in Paris last year when so many Jamaicans were disappointed about what happened? He said it was under review. This was March. Before, or late February, early March, I think, was the champs launch. And nothing to say to the public, this is what happened in Paris. This is what we're going to try to do things differently. But clearly, we're almost 6 months into a new year, and we have not heard a single thing. Because somehow it seems as if there's a belief that they don't have to be accountable to anybody. And then they wonder why there's this negative vibe towards the J3s. We understood that going into China, the athletes had travel issues. They were bumped off flights. They had to wait on connecting flights on standby. They left on Sunday. Some of them got into China on Tuesday afternoon. Right? We have heard nothing from the J3s to explain anything that has happened, to say, okay, this is perhaps why this happened, or we are trying our best to be able to ameliorate a situation because this may have happened. So you hear nothing, and then they expect you to just continue to march along like zombies without asking questions. And when you ask questions, they say they characterize you as troublemakers, or rabble rousers, or backbiters or haters, whatever the term is that they choose to use. The fact is that they need to do a better job of communicating with the people who they are asking to support them and to support the athletes, and it needs to change.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that, Leighton Levy. I was stunned, but at the same time not stunned to learn on Friday that a few of the athletes who had been named originally did not turn up in China, and I could not believe, well actually I could, that the J3 would not have sent out a release to say this is the situation, the team has changed, some members haven't turned up, we are actually facing an issue with the women's 4x4 team, we are short, whatever the case might be, absolutely nothing. But quickly to what actually happened on the track, Leighton, the men's 4x100, quite unfortunate. What did you make of that botch change between Julian Fort and Johan Blake on day one. And I guess day number two, just really unfortunate that Julian got hurt again.
I think for the first one, I think it's something that happens in the relays very often. There's a miscommunication between the incoming runner and the outgoing runner, and the button was released into midair and it fell. It has happened before to us. I think we saw it back in 2008 between Sharon Simpson and Kieran Stewart. I don't know why it happens in that particular situation. Maybe because Julian he hasn't been part of the national setup for so long because he's had injuries as long as the disclaimers that you hear on these drug companies when they're advertising drugs on TV. And, so maybe the unfamiliarity of the circumstance under stress of competition may have led to that unfortunate situation. In the in the second round of qualifiers, he pulled up another injury again. He made an effort to try to exchange with Johan, who then turned in anticipation of receiving the button, but then he fell. So, it's just an unfortunate that happened then. And of course, the person who I'm sorry for most in that circumstance, other than Julian Fort with the injuries that he picked up, is Kishane Thompson, who never got a chance to even showcase what he was capable of delivering. And it's unfortunate, and I think it's one of these things that happen in relays, and I don't think, I know that people coming out on sport and people coming out on Johan Blake. Look, these things happen in the relays, and right now it seems as if it's our turn to have these mishaps. And I hope we can learn from it. Maybe we need to have more relay camps. We need to have relay practices, except for, other than when we're going to make the championships like this, and have the athletes familiarize themselves a little bit more with each other. Because Julian coming into this team is a brand new setup. We haven't seen him in a team like this for a number of years now.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of the issue.
Yeah, Leighton, I hear you said Julian Ford quite a lot. One of the suggestions I've seen, maybe the most popular one, is that Johan Blake made a couple of mistakes that you don't expect someone of his experience level to make. So on the opening day, instead of keeping that arm steady, his hand steady, he was moving around, feeling for the baton, and every quality coach will tell you that you shouldn't do that. And then I also hear individuals criticizing him for moving off when it was clear that Julian Fort was in a spot of bother and was going to struggle to get to him to make the change.
All right, so let's deal with the first one first, quickly. You keep your hand as still as possible, right? But you could also argue that he can't see the stick. So the onus probably would have been on the incoming runner who has all the sight of everything.
But isn't that why you keep it steady though?
Keep your hand, yeah, I agree with that part, that you keep your hand steady, but you don't release the button until it is secured in the person's hand. So don't release it until that happens, right? So I think there's blame to go around for both of them, which is why I said these things happen from time to time. The second time, when he pulled up injured, looks like about 10 meters from the exchange zone, he made a move again towards Blake as if to say, okay, I will be able to make it. So Blake turned in anticipation because of instinct. And while maybe it lacked a bit of awareness, you can't blame him for wanting to turn, because in the heat of the moment, when other people are making their exchanges, you want to be able to at least maintain the advantage that we had temporarily along that leg. So he turned when Julian looked like he leaped towards him again to make this exchange. He turned in anticipation of receiving the stick. Then Julian fell. There's nothing he could do about that. We like to throw blame around because we like to have people, things to blame people for. But the reality is that these things happen, and it's unfortunate the injury that happened to Julian Ford. But he did make an effort to try to get the stick to Johan. She then turned in anticipation of receiving the stick, and then Julian fell. What are you going to do about that? Mm-hmm. If you take the emotion out of it and look at what actually happened, then you'll begin to have a clear understanding of why it happened, as opposed to throwing and having all of the logic behind it, muddled by emotion.
Mm. All right. The other issue I want to take up with you is that there's a growing sentiment that the great Shericka Jackson has come to the end of her road. And I'm going to put it the way a lot of Jamaicans are putting it, which is a little bit unbelievable to me. Leighton Levy, they are saying she's finished.
I don't think she is. I just think, look, a couple of things that I want to say on this. One is that from a coaching perspective, I think her coaches know where she is. Was she ready to run here? Maybe this was an opportunity for them to see what she was capable of. If you're a fan, it's a totally different perspective, because here's why. You get the stick 2 steps behind a Spanish runner who nobody knows. And she was able to make an impression on that leg in the preliminary round. In the final, she was closer to the Spanish runner. Still could not overtake her. But then to make matters worse, the girl with a very, very opportune name of Success, everyone, runs past both of them in the last 20 meters of that race, which suggests that perhaps Shericka has lost a step so far this season, because we don't know the severity of the injury that she had last year that kept her out of the Olympic Games. But so there are two ways to look at it. From a coaching perspective, the Francis brothers may be looking and say, okay, fine, this is where she is. This is what we need to do. She doesn't need to compete at national championships. So we have the next 2 months to get her ready for Tokyo, because she's a defending champion. From a fan perspective, they're looking at something and saying, hello, she's lost to Julian Alfred over 300 meters about a month ago. She lost to Anna Via Battle in Europe. I don't remember exactly where it was. And of course, she looked pretty ordinary here against athletes who she was expected to beat. I mean, do you know who that Spanish ankle leg runner was? In both, nobody knows who she is. Somebody who I know very well says, you know, she's there because she's a hot girl. But the reality is that nobody knows who she is, so nobody would expect that Shericka would not be able to overhaul her on an ankle leg when you are one of the fastest women to have ever lived, 10:65, 21:41. So for that to happen in the heat is one thing. But then to come back in the final, when you get the stick pretty much in line with everybody else, and then fail to make an impression, and then get overhauled, the fans are going to be concerned. But as, you know, logic would dictate, I think we have some time to wait to see what she eventually delivers later on in the year, maybe in 6 weeks or so at a national championship, if she chooses to run there, or in intermediately, where she's able to see her gradually improve. But you can look at it in two ways. We don't know where she is in her program, because, of course, her coaches are keeping that close to their chest. But to the fans, it's worrying. I wouldn't say she's done, but it is worrying.
All right, Leighton Levy, I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. I'm sure we'll be catching up and chatting more track and field. This was a good discussion. We'll chat again soon.
Take it easy, guys.
All right, Leighton Levy. Lance and Mariah, you know, it's interesting, and I have so much to say, but for today, I'll just keep it to the Shericka Jackson discussion. It amazes me that individuals are saying that at 30 years old, one of the greatest to ever do it is done, because she had an injury at the back end of last year, and she has started this season not looking her best self. But I also want to make the point that it is not uncommon for Shericka Jackson to look just okay at this stage of the season. From she was a 400-meter runner, she usually comes on at the trials, and then at the global championship, she tends to get even better. If you look back at her senior history, that is what generally happens. Think about last year, for example, when she wasn't even 100% healthy and she was battling several injuries. She seems to be healthier to me this season, which is the best sign. But if you look back at last season, on the Diamond League circuit, she was struggling. She had lost like 2 or 3 200 races. She was running 22 9s, 22 8s, 22 7s or whatever. And she came to the national championships and she won the double in 10.8 and a comfortable 22.2.
Yeah.
She has 2 of the finest coaches in the history of the sport, the Francis brothers. I am not worried at this stage. And the World Championships, by the way, is September. It's not July. There's
time.
so much time.
It's a reflection of how unforgiving the fans can be, and it's disappointing. I agree with you, because it is much too early in her career
To rule her out.
to rule her out, and it's much too early in this season to suggest that she's finished.
Especially when
I find it very, very distasteful, some of the comments that people would be making. I understand the disappointment, because as Leighton pointed out, she was beaten by unknowns. Yeah. And to be honest, at the end of the race, I could see by the expression on her face that she was hurt.
Yes.
I could, when I say hurt, I'm
disappointed.
Yes,
Yeah.
I could see that. So it is obvious that she felt disappointed in herself. But this is, we're in May.
Yes.
As you said, the World Championships is in September, and she's coming off a season that she was fairly badly hurt enough that she could not compete at the Olympic Games, and we have to give her time. She's a class athlete, and we have to give her time to see how she develops and improves throughout the season.
Yeah, and Spain ran 42.1, which is a pretty good time. The Jamaicans ran 42.3, which is a pretty good time. Those are times that many a times get medals at global events, not suggesting that that will get a medal this year. But again, it's May, and there's a long way to go. I wish we could just talk track and field for the entire show, and I know you do too, but we can't. We've got to go. The producer has been saying break for about 30 minutes now. We'll be back with more on the SportsMax Zone.